After a bit, they head to a corner store to grab a bite. Lee and Ju pick up some food, and surprisingly, they also get Youngchan's favorite ramen. This catches him off guard, while they're all having a good laugh about the guys who tried to start a fight with them, pointing out that even with more people, those guys couldn't beat them. Ijin is struggling to figure out how to open his onigiri. He watches Lee and is impressed when he successfully opens it. Ijin then asks how the fight started in the first place. Lee explains that they initiated it by picking a fight with Youngchan. Lee gives Youngchan some advice on how to handle such situations, emphasizing the importance of attitude and not letting fear take over. He warns that people like them can cause even more trouble if you show fear. Youngchan is unsure, worried about getting hit more if he doesn't show fear. Lee acknowledges that it's possible, depending on the person he's dealing with, but he encourages Youngchan not to be scared and assures him that he can handle it with effort. This makes Ijin reflect on his own past experiences with bullying, where things were much worse, with stronger individuals taking food from the weaker ones. One bully even tried the same with Ijin, but in the survival of the fittest environment, it didn't end well for the bully because Ijin is a survivor. Youngchan, hesitant at first, summons the courage to speak up, admitting that he used to hate Lee and Ju not long ago. They used to bully their classmates, including him, without realizing it was considered bullying. They thought it was just joking around. Plus, it's not like they hit anyone or made people do things they didn't want to do. Compared to that, they're practically saints. Youngchan yells out that the mean things they said and the pranks they pulled still felt like bullying to him. He despises them for doing it without thinking twice. Lee and Ju are completely surprised by this revelation and apologize a lot. They thought they were just having fun with pranks and never realized it could be hurtful. Youngchan mentions that he started feeling this way after spending time with them. They never stole or physically harmed anyone, but the words and pranks hurt. They apologize again, and Youngchan seems appreciative. However, disaster strikes when Ijin accidentally drops his onigiri, and he's visibly upset. The group looks at his defeated expression. Inside a building owned by SW, Yuna's cousin is sitting at a table when she notices a commotion outside her door. It turns out to be Yuna herself, demanding to know why her cousin is investigating Ijin. Yuna has looked into him before but promised to stop, so she insists her cousin should do the same. Her cousin fires back, saying this is how people like them survive. Has Yuna forgotten what happened to her? Even though he saved her life, it doesn't mean he can be trusted. After all, he's lying about his entire past. Her guard chimes in, saying they had no choice but to look into him since all his documents were forged. The cousin says she's happy Yuna is there because the call with all the info about Ijin is coming soon. Isn't Yuna curious about who he is? Yuna says she isn't, giving her a mean look, and the cousin does the same. The phone rings, the cousin answers, and we finally learn her name, Shin Jia. The person on the other end says he called about Ijin's info. Jia is excited to finally get it, but her hopes are crushed when the caller says the higher-ups ordered SW to stop digging into him. This surprises everyone, and she gets mad, asking how they can just ignore him. The caller explains that due to SW's ties with the government, all they can say is this: Ijin is not a concern. After being separated from his family in a plane crash, he just wants to be with them. The next day, Yuna and Sukju go to school. They notice Ijin is absent, and Yuna asks Youngchan about his whereabouts. Lee, who was there too, tells her the teacher called him, so he'll probably be back soon. They sit down, and Sukju mentions the company owner came to school, surprising Yuna. She wonders if he's here to meet Ijin. It sure looks that way because Ijin is in the lounge with him, thanking Ijin for saving Yuna. Ijin does his usual thing, saying he was just saving his sister, and Yuna happened to be there. The owner acknowledges he heard about that but insists it doesn't change the fact that Ijin saved Yuna. He also says sorry for getting his sister mixed up in something like this. Ijin points out that Yuna apologized too, so there's no need for all that. He turns to leave after excusing himself. Out of the blue, the owner asks if Ijin can be Yuna's bodyguard, but Ijin says that's not a regular job for a high schooler like him. The owner fires back, saying no high schooler can take down not just a bunch of guys but also soldiers from foreign forces. Ijin asks about the protection group she has, but the owner mentions they can't come to school. With them always following her, she can't live a normal life. Sukju even asked to be let go from his bodyguard duty, saying he wasn't cut out for it after what happened. Ijin leaves, saying it's something he can't do. Just as Ijin is about to open the door, the owner drops one more thing. Yuna isn't the only reason he's there. He came to personally thank Ijin for what happened 3 years ago. This catches Ijin off guard. He finally gets the chance to express his gratitude because he could witness his son's final moments thanks to Ijin. Ijin says it was just a simple favor, but the owner insists it was a request that nobody else took because they all thought it was crazy. Because Ijin accepted, he could reunite with his son. The owner mentions how his son always spoke highly of Ijin, wondering how a young guy became a mercenary. He asked Ijin to look into it, but still couldn't find him. Yuna is also his daughter. Ijin thinks about her father's words, mentioning he has a daughter about his age. After a moment of thought, Ijin says he can't officially be Yuna's bodyguard, but he won't just stand by if something happens to her. The owner says that's enough and asks for Ijin's opinion on the SW guards, curious about their pride and assuming they're the ones who solved Yuna's situation. He wants Ijin's take but not for free, it's a formal request. Ijin sighs, goes back to the classroom, and ignores Yuna's greeting as class has started. While sitting, he reflects on Yuna's father, how they met on the battlefield, and how he offered Ijin a better meal, telling him to eat well for his age. Later, Ijin overhears fellow mercenaries discussing the money the client is investing in a nearby town for building roads, schools, and hospitals. They all believe it's a waste of money. We see Yuna's father constantly helping Ijin in small ways, like giving him a chocolate bar, water, and chips, and even covering him when it rains. One day, Ijin has to leave for the next mission, and Yuna's father expresses disappointment as he's gotten attached to Ijin. He suggests Ijin visit when he has time, mentioning he'll be around for about a month. Yuna's father gives Ijin a bag of food and medical supplies, prompting Ijin to finally ask why he's doing all this. The father is surprised Ijin knows Korean and explains that Ijin reminds him of his daughter, so he couldn't leave him alone. After a while, Ijin hears from another mercenary that the volunteer group he escorted got attacked, and it seems they were waiting for them to leave. Most of the volunteers were killed. Yuna interrupts Ijin's thoughts, asking for a bit of his time. They go to a resting area, where Sukju apologizes for doubting Ijin. Ijin assures him it's fine, he did what he had to. Yuna invites him somewhere at her grandfather's request, thinking he'll refuse, but he surprises her by accepting. Elsewhere, Jia is still upset about the information refusal regarding Ijin. Her thoughts are interrupted when her subordinate tells her Ijin is here to see her. Inside the SW building, Ijin gets ready for training, and Sukju asks why he suddenly accepted. He reflects on what the company owner told him. He just has to live with the other bodyguards for a few days. He's already talked to them, so it should be okay. Ijin tells Sukju that he just wanted to see what being a bodyguard is like. He also asks why Sukju isn't training, but Sukju is on Team 3, and only Team 2 is training today. Team 3 is responsible for protecting Yuna, while Team 2 guards Jia and her parents. Ijin heads to the training room, where the team leader introduces him to the rest of the team. One team member asks if he's the student who solved the recent incident with Sukju, and Ijin confirms it. He greets the team, and they all start training, with Yuna watching. She thinks this kind of thing suits Ijin. Then she notices Jia and wonders why she's there. The team leader is surprised at how well Ijin keeps up and speeds up the training for everyone. Afterward, everyone is exhausted except Ijin, who still looks like he has plenty of stamina left. The training continues, and Ijin outperforms everyone in Team 2, with both Yuna and Jia noticing. After the session ends, the team leader wonders why Ijin is so skilled and spots Jia, thinking they might get criticized for their poor performance. One team member asks if he can test Ijin's combat abilities. The chief initially says no to the offer, but then Ijin steps forward, surprising everyone, and says he's okay with it. The chief reluctantly agrees but insists they wear protective gear first. Everyone wonders if Ijin will be okay because most of the SW bodyguards are from special forces. Jia wonders how far he'll go, and her subordinate doubts he stands a chance since the bodyguards were specially trained before joining SW. The team leader sets some rules, emphasizing it's just a sparring match, and the guy Ijin is fighting assures not to worry while trying to intimidate Ijin, who stays unfazed. The sparring kicks off, and the guy quickly closes the gap, throwing a left hook, but Ijin dodges skillfully. Finding an opportunity, Ijin hits the guy's leg and throws a punch, but the guy blocks it and tries to counter. However, his hook gets blocked, and Ijin throws a powerful punch, hitting where the helmet doesn't cover, stunning the guy. With a swift knee attack, Ijin ends the fight, leaving everyone surprised. Sukju comments that Ijin doesn't know how to hold back. Jia questions if he's really 19, but her subordinate is angry, glaring with ill intent. They carry the injured guy out of the room, and the leader acknowledges Ijin's battle skills. He notices Jia's subordinate looking at them, and it turns out he's the actual team leader, with the other guy just filling in for this training session. Someone else, Choi Bomsuk, one of the best on the team, wants to spar with Ijin. The substitute leader says he can't, but Ijin suggests they spar because he hasn't done enough to feel tired, surprising everyone. They get ready, and Bomsuk doesn't wear a helmet, saying he doesn't need one. Ijin does the same, surprising everyone again. Jia asks the team leader what he thinks will happen, and he says the last guy was caught off guard, but this time he won't underestimate Ijin. They train every day without a break, and Bomsuk is their star player. Yuna's bodyguard points out that in a straight-up fight like this, physical abilities decide the winner, and Bomsuk is a tough opponent. In any case, this is going to be hard for Ijin. The sparring begins, and it seems they are evenly matched, blocking each other's blows. Bomsuk boasts that Ijin can't break through his defenses, but Ijin proves him wrong by targeting one of his knees, making him lose his guard. Ijin seizes the opportunity and lands a few hits. Bomsuk gets mad and throws a punch at Ijin. However, this backfires as Ijin blocks the attack and hits him in the neck, ending the spar. Yuna's bodyguard notices how skilled Ijin is, using everything to his advantage in a fight. Ijin offers a turn to anyone else, but they all stay quiet. The temporary leader starts to say something about Ijin's fighting style but stops, thinking it would sound like nagging after losing to a high schooler. Jia asks the team leader for his thoughts, and he says Ijin is outstanding from basic training to sparring. She moves on, saying they should move to the next part. Speaking directly to Ijin, she mentions that now that he's done with basic training, it's time for the real deal. Since he's already following Team 2's schedule, he's coming with her. In his office, the owner discusses Ijin with someone, probably another guard. They're both surprised by his skills, finding it hard to believe that the codename, Jin, belongs to that young kid. That name was famous years ago, indicating he was this exceptional when he was younger than he is now. In the changing room, Ijin puts on a suit, looking quite sharp in it. At his house, the grandpa asks Daeun where Ijin is. She says he's got something to do, so he'll be late today. Grandpa hopes he'll be okay and not get into any fights. Inside the SW building, the substitute leader gives the team a serious look, hoping they're ready for some tough training. Yuna sees Ijin coming out of the changing room in a suit, and the team likes him even less now because of how he looks. Ijin's bodyguard duties start, and the team leader orders him to sit next to Jia. Ijin does, and as soon as he sits down, he checks out how many bodyguards are there. Jia interrupts by asking if he ever wanted to be a celebrity since she runs an entertainment company, which is where they're heading tonight. Ijin says he's not interested, sticking to his story that he's into bodyguarding. Jia thinks he's talented in that area, considering how easily he took down 2 people from the team. The team leader is upset to hear this, but Ijin brushes off the loss, saying they were caught off guard because he's a student, so they had to be more careful. It was an advantageous situation for Ijin from the beginning. Jia thought he'd be happy after taking down 2 trained people, but the team leader knew he was being considerate, understanding their situation. They reach the destination and guard Jia with the team leader noting that Ijin hasn't moved at all in the last hour. He asks Ijin where he got his training, saying that kind of performance needs serious practice. Ijin replies that he learned it from the neighborhood he grew up in. The team leader thinks he's joking, but it turns out there's some truth to his words. Ijin had to run, train, and sometimes even fight to survive where he lived. After a while, they hit the road again, and Jia asks if Ijin is okay since it's getting late. He says he's fine, and she notes that it doesn't seem like it's his first time bodyguarding. He reassures her that it is. The team leader feels the same way. Ijin hasn't asked a single question, and they intentionally didn't give him dinner, but his facial expression remains unchanged. Ijin notices something, a truck approaching from the front with the driver passed out. The driver tries to dodge, but they still collide, sending the car into a spin. The team leader quickly checks on Jia but is surprised to see that Ijin has already protected her by holding her tightly. He wonders how Ijin managed to protect her so quickly. Jia quickly frees herself from his grasp, and another guard checks to make sure she's okay. It turns out the incident was caused by drunk driving, with the driver losing consciousness. The team leader orders them to call an ambulance and investigate the driver, just in case it was planned. Jia looks at Ijin, who's sitting calmly. One of the bodyguards calls for an ambulance, reminding her that Ijin might have some injuries too. She asks if he's okay, but it seems he's fine. Ijin changes the subject and advises her to wear her seatbelt from now on, even in the backseat. Confused, she agrees. The next day, Daeun is making lunch for Grandpa, and Ijin asks why she's doing it now. Daeun explains that she'll go to his workplace to give it to him. This used to happen more often, but she hasn't had time. Ijin decides to go with her to his workplace. At work, Someone notices that Grandpa looks happy and invites him to share rice cakes during the break. Grandpa agrees, saying he has to recycle some things. While cleaning up, he thinks about the happy memories he made with Ijin, his face lighting up with joy. Suddenly, there's a commotion, with someone asking a person to move their car as it's blocking others. The car owner angrily looks at the guy, saying he just has something to throw away. He comes over to Grandpa, throws the trash right next to him without aiming for the nearby trash cans. Grandpa picks up the trash. The guy's girlfriend hands him another bag to throw, and he does the same, not even attempting to recycle. The grandfather does it instead, and that's when he hears Daeun's voice. He looks behind him, seeing her and Ijin walking towards him. He asks what they're doing here, and Daeun says they brought him lunch. She also asks if he's recycling, and the grandfather says he is because it'll pile up otherwise. Daeun rolls up her sleeves, saying she'll help. Ijin watches with a smile on his face. Nearby, Dusik and his subordinate come out of an apartment complex. Dusik mentions finally getting a good night's rest after sleeping in his own home. Suddenly, he spots Ijin, and his subordinate points out that the patrolman with him is his grandpa. Dusik also sees the girl, thinking she must be his sister. He looks at Ijin, who's smiling. Dusik laughs to himself, surprised that he didn't know Ijin could make such an expression. Right now, he really looks like a normal high schooler. His subordinate suggests greeting them, but Dusik refuses, saying they'll ruin the mood if they go over there. After a while, they all have lunch, and the siblings leave. The grandfather is happy to have such caring people around him. At night, he finishes work and sees the troublemaker's car parked where it shouldn't be. He approaches them, saying they can't park there as it'll make it harder for other cars to leave. The troublemaker tells him he can park wherever he wants, and his girlfriend warns him about getting fired. The grandfather calmly points out an empty space in the parking lot, but the troublemaker refuses, asking if he'll pay for damages if his car gets scratched. Suddenly, someone grabs the troublemaker's neck. It's Dusik's subordinate, who sternly scolds the troublemaker, throws him against the car, and orders him to move it. He also gives them a final warning, threatening consequences if they disrespect the elderly man again. As the car leaves, he turns to the grandfather, his expression softening. He asks if he's all right, and the grandfather thanks him. The subordinate says there's no need for formalities and asks if he recognizes him, mentioning he comes around frequently and recently visited Ijin. The grandfather remembers. Later, he tells Dusik the story while pouring him a drink. Dusik praises him for handling the situation, but suddenly, the door slams open. It's Ijin, looking really angry. Dusik asks what's wrong, and Ijin shows him the message his grandfather sent. A picture of him with the subordinate, and he's kind of proud of it. Ijin questions if this is a threat, but it seems it wasn't intended that way. At the SW building, Jia asks about Ijin, and the team leader says they took him to the hospital, but he only had mild injuries, nothing serious. She recalls how he saved her and suggests they still check in on him. If they made a kid work and he got hurt, there would be a lot of fuss. While getting dressed, Sukju asks Ijin why he acted so calmly compared to the last practice. Ijin explains that he didn't know the rules of this place back then, and there's nothing good about standing out. Ijin also asks why Sukju is here, thinking he quit bodyguarding. Sukju clarifies that he was never a bodyguard in the first place. Considering his family issues and growing up with Yuna, he just happened to take this job with people encouraging him. But due to his mistake, Yuna got kidnapped. He mentions stopping another attempt by chance right before coming to Korea, realizing he got complacent without realizing it. Sukju also asks Ijin where he got trained, and Ijin uses the same excuse. He learned it in the neighborhood he lived in. Apparently, Yuna was waiting outside the changing room and asked if he wouldn't do bodyguarding work today. She wants him to come with her as a bodyguard, saying it will be a good experience, and he doesn't have to change clothes either. Everyone is surprised by her demands. They all head to the convenience store near Ijin's house, where Yuna mentions wanting to eat this kind of food back in America. Ijin looks at his onigiri and remembers what happened earlier. Yuna asks if there's anything he wants to eat, but Ijin declines, saying he shouldn't if he's bodyguarding. Sukju steps in, explaining that Team 3 is already watching over her, so they can act normal now. He also wonders if she chose this place on purpose, thinking Ijin might have refused if she invited him to a fancy restaurant. Yuna asks if Ijin is okay, mentioning the recent car crash. She also hopes Jia didn't give him any trouble, as she can be picky. Ijin says she was fine, with Yuna noting it's unlike her not to nitpick everything. Sukju looks at Yuna, noting he's never seen her like this before. Ijin thinks about his past, recalling what happened to her father. He urged Ijin to leave him, as he would soon die even if Ijin saved him. But he wanted to thank Ijin, being the only one who came to his rescue. He wished he could see his daughter's face one more time before his death. Ijin speaks up, saying if he regrets not doing that, he should stand up. Healthier people have died in this place, and he won't die right this second. He wanted to see her face before he died, and he's sorry he couldn't. That's what her father, Shin Inguk, asked him to tell her. We witness this scene as the father is being taken for medical help. He asks Ijin to personally convey these words to her. Whether he survives or not, he must tell her. Yuna wonders when Ijin met her dad, but he gets up and leaves, saying that this is all he can tell her. She begins crying at her father's words. Ijin didn't understand back then, but he can now grasp the meaning of his request. It wasn't just for himself. It was also because he wanted to help Ijin escape this deadly battlefield. He included Ijin in the things he wanted to set right. Curious about what comes next? Click on this video to continue, and don't forget to like and subscribe.